Here we are with the final episode of Detective TeddyMD attempts to solve Dame Agatha Christie's Lord Edgware Dies. If you haven't seen the first two episodes, please pause this video and go and watch them. Also, even better, you could go and read the book Lord Edgware Dies by Dame Agatha Christie. So at the end of Act 2, the two Marsh cousins, Captain Ronald Marsh, now Lord Edgware, and Geraldine Marsh, the daughter of the late Lord Edgware, are looking very guilty as a taxi driver admits to picking them up from the opera a little before 11 o'clock, and then taking them to Lord Edgware's house where they briefly went in, and then taking them back to the opera after they had both come back from inside the house. So, Poirot and Captain Hastings go and see the new Lord Edgware, Captain Marsh, and Geraldine, and they both admit to having gone to the house and what the reason that he gives is that he had again been in some debts. We know that he was a ne'er-do-well before becoming the fifth Baron Edgware. And so he had gone to his cousin. They had seen each other at the opera, and she agreed to let him pawn some of her pearls. And so they go back to the house during the intermission of the opera, and then they get the pearls, and then they return to the opera before the intermission is over. So he says that, and he is able to provide proof of having pawned these pearls. And he does seem to feel a little guilty about that for using his cousin in that way. But he does say that he'll do better now that he's Lord Edgware and he has a bit more access to money. Hopefully he follows through, but I have my doubts. He definitely seems like, again, a ne'er-do-well, but not a murderer. Okay. He also mentioned during this time that he saw someone that strongly resembled a Hollywood star, Brian Martin, but it was dark and he was kind of in a rush to leave. So we're not sure if it's Brian Martin or if it's Lord Edgware's butler, who we are told earlier on bear strong resemblance to each other. So, Hastings and Poirot go and see Brian Martin, and they've already learned that on the night of the murder, Brian Martin had gone out to dinner with Jenny Driver outside of London, and again they see them out eating together. Jenny Driver tells Captain Hastings and Poirot that she suspected that Carlotta Adams had romantic feelings for Ronald Marsh because when they would talk to each other, she would always mention feeling sorry for him and make excuses for him and the debts that he had accrued. So she never directly said that she was romantically interested in Ronald Marsh, but Jenny Driver was able to put it together based off of the way that she spoke about him. So Poirot later receives a copy, or actually the original letter that Carlotta had last sent to her sister shortly before she died. And it's 3 pages long, and on the second page, she is talking about Ronald Marsh. And then on the third page, she mentions that he offered her $10,000 to impersonate Jane Wilkinson on the night of the murder. One thing that Poirot notices is that the third page seems to be torn on the left side at the beginning of the page. And so something's cut off a little bit. And it also seems like a page may be missing from the letter. And so Poirot, and I myself personally as well, believe that the he that is being spoken of on the second page is different from Ronald Marsh. I also don't think that Ronald Marsh would offer her $10,000. First of all, we know that he's broke, and Ronald Marsh is aware that Carlotta knows that he's broke. Second of all, Ronald Marsh is English, and he would probably offer her pounds rather than dollars. So it's probably an American that has offered her the money to impersonate Jane Wilkinson, so which lends credence to the theory that it might be Brian Martin that's doing this. So later that day, they all are at a dinner party. So Poirot, Hastings, I believe Brian Martin is there, Jane Wilkinson is there, and is Donald Ross, the actor who had been at the dinner party where that turned out to be Jane Wilkinson's alibi for the murder. And he overhears her talking about Paris um, and talking about fashion rather than the siege of Paris from literature. And so he says that he wants to talk to Poirot later that day. The party is over. Donald Ross calls Poirot and is about to tell him that he noticed something strange at the party. And and then, in the midst of the call, he gets a visitor, and they hear him being attacked. They go to his house, and they find his body. So Donald Ross has also been murdered, and we know that he had some type of critical information that would reveal the identity of the murderer. So at this point, I'm going to make my Act 3 prediction and guess as to the identity of the murderer, or murderers at this point, because I actually think that there are two. So my theory right now is that both Carlotta Adams, I'm sorry, not Carlotta Adams, Jane Wilkinson and Brian Martin came to the house after 11 p.m., let themselves in with keys that they had or obtained in some way. And Jane Wilkinson came when she received that call asking for Lady Edgware, because I think she knew that it was Carlotta Adams that called her. And so she might know that, something's up. So she goes over and she takes the opportunity and she kills Lord Edgware. And the reason that she did this is because we know that the Duke of Merton is a devout Catholic, and my guess is that he would not marry her even if she got a divorce, because, at least the very devout Catholics don't believe in divorce and don't want to marry someone after a divorce. So she knew that the only way that she'd be able to marry the Duke of Merton is if she was a widow rather than a divorcee. Brian Martin came also, and he was planning on framing Jane Wilkinson when they see. So later that day, Poirot and Hastings are on the street, and they run into a couple coming out of seeing a Brian Martin film. And the female partner is very impressed with the dramatic sequence of him riding down a cliff on a horse in order to deliver some papers. And the male partner says, well, it was kind of a waste of time. If he had just asked Ellis right away, all of this could have been avoided. And this sparked something for Poirot. It completely escaped me until the next scene, when Poirot is meeting with Jane Wilkinson's maid named Ellis. And Ellis confirms that Brian Martin and Jane Wilkinson had been romantically involved. They'd been in love. And actually, Jane Wilkinson had, when she had originally written to Lord Edgware, she had asked for a divorce so that she could marry Brian Martin. So previously, Jane Wilkinson had said that she had lied to Lord Edgware about wanting to marry an actor because of she didn't want him to know that she was going to be marrying someone that outranked him in the aristocracy. But that was kind of a slight omission of the truth, because she had originally wanted to marry an actor and then changed her mind and decided to marry the Duke of Merton. But now we also have a very clear motive for Brian Martin to abscond with the letter in which the Lord Edgware agrees to grant her a divorce, thinking, if I can't have her, no one can, and she can stay in this miserable marriage with Lord Edgware rather than run off into the sunset with the Duke of Merton. Okay, we also come back to some pince-nez, so these little small glasses. And so I haven't put together the significance of the pince-nez, but Poirot certainly feels that he has. And so it is now time for the denouement. And so Poirot gathers together all the key players. So Captain Ronald Marsh, or now Lord Edgware, Geraldine Marsh, the secretary, Alice the maid, Jane Wilkinson, Brian Martin and Jenny Driver, the Duke of Merton and the Dowager Duchess of Merton. And Poirot has now realized that there was a reason that that a page was torn. So it turns out that He, in the reference in the letter, was actually a she. Jane Wilkinson was the one that had paid Carlotta Adams to impersonate her. And Carlotta Adams was actually the one that went to the party. Jane Wilkinson went to the Lord Edgware's house and killed him. So she did this because she wanted to marry the Duke of Merton, and the Duke of Merton, a devout Catholic, refused to marry a divorcee. So she knew that in order to be able to marry him, she would have to become a widow. So she makes herself a widow by killing Lord Edgware. She is the one that messed with Carlotta Adams after she had left Lord Edgware's house, and she's the one that put the Veronal in her bag, and also put some in her drink when they had a drink together, celebrating their triumph with the impersonation. And the reason that the pince-nez, Ellis's pince-nez, were in her bag was because they had met prior to the party to switch places. Jane Wilkinson goes into the hotel dressed as an American traveler named Miss Van Busen, and in her disguise, she uses those glasses, the pince-nez, and then comes out as Miss Van Busen, and Carlotta Adams leaves as Jane Wilkinson. So Jane Wilkinson was at the party, and Donald Ross, who was also at the Sir Montague's party, they were engaged in conversation. Carlotta Adams was a much more well-read, intelligent, cultured type of person than Jane Wilkinson. And so they were talking about the siege of Paris in literature rather than just Paris in fashion. And so when Donald Ross overhears Jane Wilkinson at that dinner party later just talking about Paris as a city rather than the siege of Paris in literature, he realizes that this might not be the same woman. And so that alert sets off his suspicion, and Jane Wilkinson realized this. And so she went over to his house and killed him. I got that Jane Wilkinson was the one that killed Lord Edgware, and I figured out her reason correctly. However, I thought that Brian Martin had been the one to kill Carlotta Adams and Donald Ross to cover up him planning to frame Jane Wilkinson. So I hope that you all enjoyed Detective TeddyMD. If you did, please like and comment, share this video, because I would love to do more. And I would really love to interact more with you all. And if you have suggestions for other books that we can do Detective TeddyMD with, please comment them as well. I look forward to hearing more from you all and hopefully doing more of these and other videos on the channel as well. Bye-bye.